Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, in the news today, we are going to talk about the U.S. military falling behind in some of their military advancements. Experts now questioning, will the U.S. be able to defend against some of the most recent military advancements from Russia and China, the hypersonic missiles that they've developed. So we'll have those details. Also, protests going on in Hong Kong. Larry McGee is going to be covering that for us. And then several stories on Turkey and regarding their offensive that they just made into Syria, the safe zone, why they want to do it, the ceasefire, how that's working, and what President Erdogan would like to do with the Syrian refugees that flowed into Turkey with that continual war going on there in Syria. But first, we're going to talk about the rising STDs. Now, according to health officials in Sacramento County, California, is seeing epidemic levels of certain sexually transmitted diseases. State health officials say syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia cases have all rose to their highest levels in 3 decades. Now, across the U.S., the CDC reports infections from the same 3 STDs has risen for the 5th consecutive year. Wow.
While health officials believe a number of factors contribute to contracting the diseases, it is clear the ability to meet new people in the cyber age has opened the doors, giving people more access to other people so that they can meet.
Well, nurse and Sacramento Life Center clinical manager Julie Criswell told NBC affiliate KCRA3 News that your dating circle used to just be people that you ran into at Safeway or at work or something like that, but now with social media, your dating circle is the entire world. And that's a big circle out there. That's what's causing all the STDs to spread so quickly.
That's right. Well, President Donald Trump is pleased with America's increase in military spending, which has made it the largest military budget in U.S. history. It is at least 4 times larger than China's budget and over 10 times greater than Russia's. Trump has said, the stronger we are, the less chance we have of going to war.
Well, therefore, the president supports projects that help the U.S. military become more technologically advanced. Projects like the USS Zumwalt, put into commission in 2016. Now, the stealth-capable guided destroyer is the newest member of the Navy's fleet, but technology comes at a hefty price tag. The Zumwalt cost around $4 billion to build.
Wow. But the U.S. military experts, believe America has to spend even more on military technology, and if it doesn't, there's a fear that a war fought with either Russia or China would be lost. Well, this news comes from a new report researched by the National Defense Strategy commissioned by Congress.
The bipartisan report warns that for every branch of the military, quote, available resources are clearly insufficient. Now, if in the event that the U.S. was fighting a major adversary while at the same time trying to deter threats from other enemies. Now, former Deputy National Security Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, John Hannon, says the report is a, quote, flashing red light. The United States risks real strategic insolvency and the danger that we could lose regional wars in critical theaters of operations.
President Trump feels otherwise. Our technology, he says, is far superior to anybody else's. Well, our jet fighters, even our tankers, but our planes, our ships, there's nobody that makes the equipment like we make it. So obviously he feels a lot differently regarding the United States military and their equipment in comparison to what those who are actually on the ground and dealing with these things, their perception of it is, a lot different.
Right, we're falling behind, but
Yeah.
his is we're way advanced.
That's right.
Well, however, that equipment, as we mentioned, comes at a price. While America has been fighting a war on terror, countries like China and Russia have been busy developing highly sophisticated military weapons like Russia's new high-speed hypersonic missile.
A new report from the Accountability Office warns there is no existing countermeasures, to defend against these hypersonic weapons. Experts say the American military needs to refocus. Michael O'Hanlon from the Brookings Institution told CBN News China's military budget is likely to double by 2030 and certainly at least double again by mid-century. At that point, it would be the larger than today's U.S. military budget.
Well, he went on to say Russia, first of all, is not going to overtake us, but have enough to be a big problem anyway. They've got 5,000 nuclear weapons just like we do. They have conventional superiority in regions where we have allies we are sworn by treaties to defend. So they're big enough to be a problem, and even if their budget is only 1/10 of ours.
Yeah, the thing that people fail to remember is that, with all these nuclear weapons stockpiled by at least the three countries, and there's more than that, United States, China, and Russia, an all-out nuclear war is going to destroy everybody, irregardless of their defense system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Eric Alderman, an American diplomat and former defense official, warns that both Russia and China are investing in new nuclear weapons and delivery platforms. He commented, "We've grown very complacent about this because since 1945, nobody has used nuclear weapons in anger. And so I think there's a tendency to think no one will ever do this."
Well, aside from North Korea and Iran, the U.S. believes no other nation will launch a premeditated attack. Now, currently, this administration is spending $716 billion on defense, which is still less when compared to the GDP of Ronald Reagan's presidency. Now, the experts say it is not clear who has the most advanced capabilities in the cyber room. So now the question is, do we direct more resources into an already enormous military budget just to stay on the cutting edge and keep Russia and China from outspending us? But one thing, Katan, to keep in mind with that spending is, a lot of the U.S.'s cost is from keeping these wars going, like the war on terror, the troops over there, all the different areas that we've gone into, wars taking place right now with the United States, and that is a lot of that cost on the spending of our military. So these other countries, Russia, China, they don't have that. So
Right.
they're focusing on their developing their weapons while we're focusing on paying for the wars, supporting the wars that we're already fighting.
Yeah, kind of like when you deal with some people, it's not about the quantity as much as it is the quality. And of course, Russia and China have been working to develop the quality of their weapons by creating hypersonic delivery systems for nuclear warheads that the United States have already admitted there's no defense for them.
Right.
Well, now we're going to take a look at one of those countries we just mentioned, China, who has been dealing with some uprisings from the area of Hong Kong, as well as some of the things we see taking place with Turkey and its war against Syria. Larry, what do you have for us?
The push for the New World Order is clothed in the banner of Western democracy. And so when sedition arises in a nation accompanied by protest for democratization, that nation can be assured that they have been targeted for reorganization and annexation by the imperial powers. Such is the case in the battle brewing over Hong Kong, which actually belongs to China and is now beset by political uprisings and calls for democracy so severe that the region's chief executive, Carrie Lam, was recently forced to give the region's State of the Union address over video due to heckling and harassment. On yet another occasion, the leader was yet again forced out of the assembly by lawmakers in the nation who called themselves the pro-democracy camp, who accused Ms. Lam of having blood on her hands. These same lawmakers are reported to be in regular consultation with the U.S. In the current global competition, alliances are shaky, unreliable, and created more out of selfish convenience than any true concern for all parties involved. Reports are that the Kurds are learning this hard lesson firsthand after helping the U.S. combat and defeat Daesh, which is yet another group reported to have been an American ally/tool at one time. America has now pulled back their protection from the Kurds, and at the same time, the Kurds' longtime enemy, Turkey, has initiated a military campaign against the group to seize the choicest parts of the land it acquired in Syria while helping the U.S. to push out ISIS. Turkey is calling the area in Syria that it would like to annex a safe zone, but for many observers, it is starting to look like nothing more than plundering and a de facto extension of Turkey's borders. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
In their report, it's pretty easy to see that depending on which side you hear the news from, whether it's the Western media or the local media there in Turkey, you get a completely different side of the story. So interesting there, as they mentioned, that they had to be careful. There's a war in the medias there, and what's actually being said, and the truth, lies somewhere in the middle. Right. Well, let's take a look at an upcoming video here regarding Turkey's plan to address the Kurdish people displaced from their homes in Syria who are now living as refugees in southern Turkey.
Throughout Syria's civil war, the country's borders have not changed, but the demographics within those borders have, drastically. When the war began in 2011, Syria's Kurdish minority was spread in pockets along the border with Turkey. Over the 8.5 years of fighting, Kurdish militias have gradually taken control of almost 400 kilometers of territory along that border. The Turkish government now looks at its southern frontier and sees potential enemies at the gates, what it calls a terror block at its border. It says it wants to turn that area into a safe zone, a place refugees currently in Turkey can relocate to in Syria.
Yeah, it's sad to see that the real victims of these wars, these scrimmages, are the innocent civilians who, in many cases, are displaced from their homes and have to become refugees in other countries. Well, after a referendum passed on April 16th that will give more power to Turkey's president, some people are comparing him to the first president of the new Republic of Turkey. Well, let's take a look at this video as it explains the history of the young country and its current leader.
On April 16th, Turkey narrowly voted yes on a referendum that will dramatically reorganize the government. It allows changes that give sweeping powers to the president, Tayyip Erdogan. He could have complete control of Turkey's budget and military, will be able to appoint judges to the courts without a vote, can dissolve parliament whenever he chooses, and can stay in power until 2029. This has prompted concerns that he's becoming too authoritarian. And these concerns aren't that outlandish, mostly because Turkey was built by an authoritarian.
First president of the First Turkish Republic, Mustafa Kemal, during the 1920s, is now granted dictatorial powers and is himself christened Ataturk, meaning father of the Turks.
Ataturk was a military general who created the Republic of Turkey out of the collapsed Ottoman Empire in 1923. During his 15 years in office, he enjoyed similar powers now held by Erdogan. He used them to build Turkey into a modern and secular state.
Turkey's new government separates church and state. Turkey's new government separates church and state.
He put mosques under state control.
Islamic traditions are shattered.
He made literacy rates rise. He made schools open to everyone.
To make a modern nation, all Turkey must be sent to school.
Ataturk also industrialized his country. Under his watch, the industrial sector saw a sharp increase, and his liberal foreign policies built a close relationship with the West, which paved the way for Turkey to join the NATO alliance in 1952.
We know that Ataturk succeeded because for decades it was a modern, secular Western country like he wanted it to be. Now you have President Erdogan. President Erdogan is going in literally the opposite direction. He wants to make the country much more openly religious.
But how does a religious, conservative leader acquire so much power in a secular country? Erdogan went on to pull the country out of poverty by giving more opportunities to Turkish entrepreneurs and expanding access to foreign markets. This led to a sharp rise in the GDP, and inflation plummeted. Turkey's success even prompted efforts to join the EU. This all made Erdogan wildly popular.
It was like he came onto a boat that was listing and taking on water, and he managed to get the water out of the boat and make the boat sail straight again. So for many years, you could see why a man like this would be as powerful as he became.
In 2013, there was a small, peaceful demonstration in Istanbul's Gezi Park to protest Erdogan's plans to reconstruct military barracks that would include a shopping center and a mosque. Seeing the demonstration as opposition, Erdogan sent in riot police to remove the protesters, which quickly attracted more protesters.
It got bigger and bigger because it was a proxy. It morphed from being a protest over a park to being a protest against Erdogan, against how religious he was becoming, and it got violent.
So in July 2016, they staged a coup, and it almost worked. There was just one problem. The military couldn't get the public support this time. Erdogan had found a new way to reach his supporters.
I want to encourage my people to the streets and invite them to the airports. And together, as people gather, show them, by letting them come with their tanks, to see what they are going to do it right there to the people.
Erdogan had this amazing moment where he used FaceTime on his iPhone to kind of rally the country and say, defend the country, defend us against the military. Come Turks, come to me, come help rally around me. And it worked. You had secular Turks for the first time in years defend Erdogan. You had religious Turks literally stream from mosques into the streets to fight the military. The military overstepped. You had Turkish F-16s fire rockets and missiles at parliament. Turkish tanks fired at people in the streets. That was very effective for him.
Erdogan emerged from the fighting more popular than ever and ramped up his purge of the opposition. More than 100,000 journalists, academics, military officers, and politicians have been arrested since the coup attempt. Tens of thousands remain in detention. This brings us to the recent referendum, which follows Erdogan's post-coup popularity. He set it in motion to acquire more power and to make it permanent. But the vote was much closer than it was anticipated, suggesting that much of the country wants to hold on to the secular Turkey created by Ataturk, and they're willing to fight for it.
But I do think you're going to have the inevitable tension of a president who believes he's entitled to more power, taking more and more of it, and what remains a somewhat secular country that isn't comfortable with giving him that power. Do those tensions play out politically and in court, or do those play out in the streets?
Certainly an interesting history on Turkey and the leaders that first started Turkey and now in power today.
Yeah, only in the 20s, so that hasn't been very long.
Well, a few scrimmages can be heard during the 5-day pause in fighting to allow the YPG to exit during the Turkey offensive in Syria. Both the YPG and Turkey accuse one another of not upholding what the U.S. calls a ceasefire, and Turkey calls the suspension of its military operation. Now, President Erdogan disputed the claims of not honoring the ceasefire and expects the YPG's withdrawal over the next 4 days and the U.S. to oversee the process. Now, he also threatened that the offensive will resume within minutes if the Kurdish fighters don't abide by the deal.
Well, 15 million of Syria's 80 million people are Kurdish, but the Turkish government has reiterated that its target is not the Kurdish people, but the YPG because of its links to the PKK, which is designated as a terrorist group. Well, Donald Tusk, the European Council president, is urging Turkey to withdraw its troops from Syria immediately and to respect humanitarian law. Erdogan says that Turkey isn't using the safe zone to gain territory and wants at least 1 million Syrian refugees in Turkey to go home.
Well, Erdogan said it's not a problem for Turkey if Syrian forces control the areas cleared of PKK and the YPG forces. Now, at the end, the aim is to clear the safe zone of these terror groups. Securing the safe zone is something that Erdogan and Putin will discuss during their upcoming meeting in Sochi. Then again, they'll meet in Geneva to figure out a political solution to the 8-year-long conflict in Syria.
Yeah. President Trump addressed a group of supporters regarding the recent ceasefire in northern Syria between Turkey and Kurdish fighters. Trump credited himself with bringing about the ceasefire, saying to a crowd of cheering supporters, "Sometimes you have to let them fight it out while they see or until they see that the fighting isn't so easy. Sometimes you just have to let them fight."
Well, later, Trump, in a press conference, spoke about his call to President Erdogan. He mentioned how although there was some sniper fire, it was eliminated quickly and the ceasefire continues. We have ISIS under guard and Turkey is also watching over things, and the Kurds are very satisfied with how things are going. The president also mentioned how the U.S. now has control over the oil in the Middle East that everyone was so worried about. We, referring to the U.S., now have control over it.
And that seems to be kind of the main focus in any of these wars, especially when the United States is involved in it, is somehow getting a hold of some type of oil, securing oil for the United States, which, by the way, is the largest exporter of oil than any country. I mean, we've surpassed Saudi Arabia as well as far as exporting oil and the production of the oil that we have. But it's always behind a lot of these things we see in northern Syria and Iran, you know, and some of the other places that we've gone into and brought forth these wars. And so it's sad to see that so many people have to lose their lives and also be displaced from their homes as a result of, you know, chasing after that oil.
And you know, even as you mentioned there, that now the U.S. saying they have control over it, you know, some of the leaders in those countries, they chuckled when President Trump said, you know, we're going to watch over the oil, because they said, well, now at least they're admitting what they're here for, you know, what they were after the whole time. So, you know, it's it definitely shows you that the oil is a major factor in these wars.
Yeah. Well, if you would like to learn a little bit more about what the Holy Scriptures say concerning the oil in these last days, and the fact that the prophets showed, Israel Hawkins has told us and brought forth many times, that they would actually be saying not to hurt the oil at this time, contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
Well, to write the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. If you'd like to visit our website, you can go to YPNnews.com. For any emails to the House of Yahweh, you can email them at info@Yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, don't forget to go to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com to answer any and all of your scriptural questions. You can type it right in the search. Pages and pages of information will come up. You can search through it, guaranteed to expand your knowledge on the Holy Scriptures.
Well, don't go anywhere. Get your jars ready, because up next is the golden oil being poured out from the House of Yahweh that will bring you life everlasting. Yisrael Hawkins is up next, so stay with us. Everyone here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Harmerman.
Thank you for watching.